What happens when one of the most respected actors in Hollywood history walks onto a morning talk show and refuses to play by the rules? What happens when a television host pushes too hard, asks one question too many, and crosses a line that should never be crossed? It only took 34 seconds. 34 seconds of silence, 34 seconds of Denzel Washington staring directly into Savannah Guthrie's eyes, without blinking, without moving, without saying a single word. 34 seconds, that would change everything. But before we get to that moment, you need to understand how we got there. You need to understand what led up to one of the most uncomfortable, most tense, most absolutely unforgettable moments ever captured on live television. The morning started like any other at the Today Show studio. The lights were bright. The coffee was hot. The producers were running around with clipboards and headsets, making sure everything was perfect. Because today was not just any day. Today, they had booked one of the biggest names in entertainment, a man who had won 2 Academy Awards, a man who had been acting for over 4 decades, a man who commanded respect simply by walking into a room. Denzel Washington arrived at the studio early that morning. He was dressed sharp, as always. A perfectly fitted dark suit, a crisp white shirt. He looked like a man who had nothing to prove to anyone, because he did not. His career spoke for itself. His work spoke for itself. His legacy was already written in stone. The green room was quiet when he entered. His team had made sure of that. They knew Denzel liked to have a few moments of peace before any interview, a chance to collect his thoughts, a chance to breathe. He sat down in a comfortable chair and closed his eyes for just a moment. Outside that green room, the energy was completely different. Savannah Guthrie was preparing for what she thought would be the interview of the year. She had her notes spread out in front of her. She had her questions highlighted. She had spent the entire previous week researching every single detail of Denzel's life, his career, his family, his past. But here's the thing about Savannah that morning. She was not interested in the usual talk show conversation. She was not interested in asking about his latest film. She was not interested in discussing his craft or his inspiration or his journey. No, Savannah had something else in mind. She wanted something bigger. She wanted something that would make headlines. She wanted to push buttons, and that decision, that choice she made before the cameras even started rolling, would prove to be a terrible mistake. The floor manager called out to the studio, 5 minutes to air. The audience members who had been lucky enough to get tickets that morning were buzzing with excitement. They could not believe they were about to see Denzel Washington in person. Some of them had been fans for decades. Some of them had grown up watching his movies. Some of them had posters of him on their walls. Denzel was escorted from the green room to the studio floor. He walked with the kind of confidence that only comes from years of experience. He smiled at a few of the crew members. He shook hands with a camera operator who told him how much he loved one of his earlier films. Denzel thanked him genuinely. He was always gracious with people who worked behind the scenes. He understood that they were the ones who really made everything happen. Then he saw Savannah. She was standing near the interview chairs, adjusting her blazer and checking her reflection in a small mirror. When she noticed Denzel approaching, she put on a big smile and walked over to greet him. "Denzel, it is so wonderful to have you here. We have been looking forward to this for weeks." Denzel nodded politely. "Thank you for having me." There was something in his tone, something subtle, something that suggested he was already reading the room, already sensing that something was not quite right. Denzel had been doing interviews for longer than some of the people in that studio had been alive. He knew how to read energy. He knew how to tell when someone had an agenda. They took their seats across from each other. The lighting crew made their final adjustments. The makeup artist came over for one last touch-up. Denzel waved her off gently. He was fine. He was ready. The floor manager began the countdown. 10 seconds. 9, 8, 7. Savannah took a deep breath and put on her television smile, the one that had made her famous, the one that millions of Americans saw every single morning. 6, 5, 4. Denzel sat back in his chair, relaxed, composed. He had done this 1,000 times before. 3, 2, 1. Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the Today Show. I am here with a true legend of cinema, a man who needs absolutely no introduction. Please welcome the incomparable Denzel Washington. The studio. Audience erupted in applause. Denzel smiled and gave a small wave of acknowledgement. He was humble about it, as he always was. "Denzel, thank you so much for being here with us this morning." "It is my pleasure. Thank you for having me." Now, you have had one of the most incredible careers in Hollywood history, 2 Academy Awards, countless iconic roles. You are often called one of the greatest actors of your generation. How does that feel? Denzel chuckled softly. Well, I do not think about it too much, to be honest. I just try to do good work. I try to tell stories that matter. The rest is just noise. Just noise? Really? With all those accolades? Awards are nice, do not get me wrong, but they are not why I do what I do. I act because I love the craft. I love the process. I love disappearing into a character and bringing something real to the screen. That is what drives me. It was a perfect answer, thoughtful, genuine, the kind of response that reminded everyone why. Denzel was so beloved, but Savannah was not interested in perfect answers. She wanted something else. Speaking of characters you have played, let us talk about some of your more controversial roles over the years. You have played some very complex men, some would say morally questionable men. Do you think that says something about you personally? Denzel's expression shifted slightly, just a flicker, barely noticeable to anyone who was not paying close attention, but it was there. I think every actor plays a variety of roles. That is the job. You take on different characters to explore different aspects of the human experience. It does not mean those characters reflect who you are as a person, but surely there must be some connection, right? Some part of you that relates to these darker characters? No, I do not think that is accurate at all. Acting is about empathy. It is about understanding people who are different from you. That does not mean you share their qualities. The audience was quiet now. They could feel the energy in the room starting to shift. Something was happening. Something uncomfortable. Savannah pressed on. Well, let me ask you this. There have been rumors over the years about your personal life, about your temperament on set. Some people have said you can be difficult to work with. Would you say that is fair? Denzel paused. He looked at Savannah for a long moment before responding. I would say that I have very high standards. I expect excellence from myself and from everyone around me. If that makes me difficult, then so be it. But I do not apologize for wanting to do great work. So you admit you can be difficult? I admit that I care deeply about my craft. There is a difference. The tension was building now. You could feel it in the air. The audience members were glancing at each other nervously. Some of the crew members behind the cameras were exchanging looks. This was not going the way anyone expected. Savannah leaned forward in her chair. She had that look in her eyes, the look of someone who thought they had the upper hand, the look of someone who was about to push even harder. Denzel, let me be direct with you. There have been whispers in the industry for years. Whispers about how you treat people, whispers about your ego. Do you think your success has gone to your head? The question hung in the air like a storm cloud. Denzel did not respond immediately. He sat there, perfectly still, looking at Savannah with an expression that was impossible to read. The silence stretched on. 3 seconds, 5 seconds, 10 seconds. The audience was holding their breath. Finally, Denzel spoke. His voice was calm, controlled, but there was steel underneath every word. Let me ask you something. Did you bring me on this show to have a conversation, or did you bring me on this show to attack my character? Savannah blinked. She clearly was not expecting to be questioned in return. I'm just asking tough questions, Denzel. That is my job. No, your job is to be a journalist. Your job is to ask questions that illuminate, that inform, that bring value to your audience. What you are doing right now is something else entirely. And what is that? You are trying to tear me down. You are fishing for something negative, something controversial, something that will make headlines. But I'm not going to give you that. I have spent 40 years building my career. I have spent 40 years earning the respect of my peers. I am not going to let you diminish that in 10 minutes. The audience let out a collective gasp. No one talked to Savannah Guthrie like that on her own show. No one. But Savannah was not backing down. If anything, she seemed energized by the confrontation. She leaned even further forward, her eyes narrowing. Denzel, I think you are being overly sensitive. These are legitimate questions that the public has a right to hear you address. The public or you? Because from where I'm sitting, it seems like you have a personal agenda. It seems like you came into this interview with your mind already made up about who I am and what kind of person I am. And that is not journalism. That is a hit piece. That is absolutely not what this is. Then explain to me why every single question you have asked so far has been designed to paint me in a negative light. You have not asked me about my work. You have not asked me about the film I am here to promote. You have not asked me about my foundation or the work we do with young people. All you want to talk about is rumors and gossip." Savannah opened her mouth to respond, but Denzel was not finished. "You know what I think? I think you saw my name on your guest list and you thought to yourself, here's an opportunity. Here's a chance to create a moment. Here's a chance to go viral. Because that is what matters now, is it not? Not the truth, not substance, just clicks and views and attention." The control room was in chaos. The producers were talking over each other, trying to figure out what to do. Should they cut to commercial? Should they let this play out? No one had a clear answer. On the studio floor, the temperature had dropped by 10 degrees. At least that is what it felt like. Savannah was visibly uncomfortable now. Her television smile was gone, replaced by something harder, something defensive. "Denzel, I think you are completely mischaracterizing this interview. I have done nothing but ask you straightforward questions." Straightforward? Is that what you call it? Asking me if my success has gone to my head? Asking me if I'm difficult to work with based on unnamed sources and vague whispers? That is not straightforward. That is disrespectful. I have a right to ask hard questions. And I have a right to call you out when those questions are designed to demean rather than to understand. Do you know how many interviews I have done in my career? Hundreds. Maybe thousands. I have sat across from journalists who challenged me, who pushed me, who made me think, and I respected every single one of them. But this is different. This is not an interview. This is an ambush. Savannah's face was turning red now. She was not used to being on the defensive. She was not used to having a guest take control of the conversation. She was scrambling for something to say, something that would put her back in charge. "Well, Denzel, I am sorry you feel that way, but I stand by my questions." "Of course you do, because admitting you were wrong would require humility, and from what I have seen so far, humility is not exactly your strong suit." The audience let out another collective gasp. Someone in the back actually laughed. It was a nervous laugh, the kind that escapes when you cannot believe what you are witnessing. Savannah's eyes flashed with anger, real anger, the kind she usually kept hidden behind her polished exterior. "You know what, Denzel, maybe the rumors are true. Maybe you really are as difficult as people say, because right now you are being incredibly combative and defensive for no reason." That was the moment. That was the line she should not have crossed. Denzel's expression changed. It was subtle, but unmistakable. The calm, controlled demeanor shifted into something else, something colder, something more intense. "For no reason? You have spent the last 15 minutes attacking my character, my reputation, my integrity. You have questioned everything about me except my work, and you think I have no reason to be defensive? I have not attacked you. I have asked questions. There is a way to ask questions, and there is a way to make accusations. You chose the latter. Do not pretend otherwise." Savannah threw up her hands in frustration. "Fine. If you want to see it that way, that is your prerogative. But I would think a man of your stature would be able to handle a little pushback." "Pushback? Is that what you call this? Because to me, it feels more like you walked into this studio with a chip on your shoulder and a desire to knock me down a few pegs, and I have to wonder why. What did I ever do to you? Have we met before? Did I offend you somehow? This is not personal, Denzel. Everything is personal. Every question you ask, every word you choose, every angle you take, it all comes from somewhere. So I will ask you again, why did you come at me like this today? What were you hoping to achieve?" Savannah was silent for a moment. The cameras were still rolling. The audience was still watching. The entire country was still tuned in. This was live television at its most raw and unfiltered. When she finally spoke, her voice had an edge to it that was impossible to miss. "I was hoping to have an honest conversation with a Hollywood legend, but clearly, you are not interested in honesty." The accusation landed like a punch. Denzel nodded slowly, almost as if he expected her to say something like that. Not interested in honesty. That is rich. Coming from someone who has done nothing but traffic in innuendo and implication for the past 20 minutes. You want honesty? Here is some honesty for you. You are a bully. You dress it up in smiles and professional language, but that is what you are. You use your platform to tear people down because it makes for good television. And you have probably gotten away with it for years because most people are too scared to call you out. Well, I am not scared. The control room had gone completely silent. Even the producers, who were always talking, always directing, always managing, had stopped. Everyone was just watching now, watching this unfold in real time. Savannah's composure cracked. You could see it happen. The mask she wore every single day, the one that made her seem warm and approachable and friendly, it slipped away. And underneath was something else entirely. How dare you? How dare you come on my show and speak to me like this? Your show? Is that what this is about? Your territory? Your domain? You think because I'm sitting in your studio, I'm supposed to bow down and take whatever you dish out? I think you should show some basic respect. Respect is earned, not demanded. And you have done nothing today to earn mine. The audience was completely silent now. No one moved. No one whispered. They were all frozen, watching this confrontation like it was a car crash in slow motion. Savannah stood up from her chair. Actually stood up. This was unprecedented. Hosts did not stand up in the middle of interviews. It simply did not happen. You know what? I think we are done here. Denzel looked up at her from his seat. His expression was unreadable. Calm, almost serene. Are we? I thought you were the one who wanted to ask tough questions. What happened? Cannot handle it when someone talks back? I can handle plenty. What I will not handle is being disrespected on my own program by a guest who clearly has an inflated sense of his own importance. The words hung in the air. Inflated sense of his own importance. She had just called one of the most accomplished actors in American history arrogant. On live television, Denzel stood up slowly. He took his time. There was no rush in his movements. He straightened his jacket. He adjusted his cuffs. And then he looked directly at Savannah. Let me tell you something. I grew up in Mount Vernon, New York. I was raised by a mother who worked her fingers to the bone to make sure I had opportunities. I went to college on a scholarship. I struggled for years before I got my first real break. Everything I have, I earned. Not because I was handed anything, not because I was privileged, but because I worked harder than anyone else in every single room I entered. He took a step closer to her. So when you sit there in your comfortable chair with your teleprompter and your cue cards and your prepared questions, and you talk about my inflated sense of importance, you have no idea what you are talking about. None. Savannah tried to interject. Denzel, I did not mean to. Yes, you did. You meant every word, and that is fine. You are entitled to your opinion. But do not backtrack now just because you realized you went too far. Own it. You wanted a confrontation? You got one. The silence that followed was deafening, and then it happened. The moment everyone would be talking about for years to come. Denzel turned away from Savannah and looked directly into the camera. Not at the audience, not at the crew, at the camera itself, at the millions of people watching from their homes. To everyone watching right now, I want you to understand something. This is not who I am. I did not come here today to argue or to fight or to create drama. I came here to talk about my work, to share my experiences, to connect with you. But sometimes, circumstances force you to stand up for yourself, and that is what I am doing right now. He paused. I have spent my entire career trying to bring dignity to every role I play, trying to represent my community with pride and excellence, trying to show young people that you can achieve anything if you are willing to put in the work. And I refuse to let anyone, no matter how powerful they think they are, diminish that. He turned back to Savannah. I wish you well. I genuinely do. But this conversation is over. And with that, Denzel Washington walked off the set. He did not storm off. He did not throw anything. He did not raise his voice to a scream. He simply walked away with the same calm, composed dignity he had displayed from the very beginning. The audience sat in stunned silence. Savannah stood there, frozen, watching him go. The cameras kept rolling. For 34 seconds, no one said a word. No one moved. No one even breathed. 34 seconds of pure, unfiltered silence. And in those 34 seconds, everything changed. The floor manager finally came to his senses and called for a commercial break. The screen cut to an advertisement for laundry detergent or something equally mundane. But no one watching was thinking about laundry detergent. Everyone was thinking about what they had just witnessed. Back on the studio floor, chaos erupted. Producers were running around. Assistants were making phone calls. The audience members were whispering to each other in shocked tones. And Savannah Guthrie just stood there, alone. In the center of that bright, hot studio, looking at the empty chair where Denzel Washington had been sitting just moments before, she looked lost, confused, like she could not quite process what had just happened. And maybe that was the point. Because for years, Savannah had operated from a position of power. She had been the one asking the questions. She had been the one controlling the narrative. She had been the one who decided how guests were portrayed, how stories were told, how truth was shaped, but not today. Today, someone had stood up to her. Someone had refused to play the game by her rules. Someone had looked her in the eye and told her exactly what he thought of her tactics, and she had no idea how to respond. Meanwhile, Denzel was already in the hallway, walking toward the exit. His assistant was by his side, trying to keep up with his pace. "Sir, that was incredible." Denzel did not break stride. "It was necessary. The producers are going crazy. They do not know what to do." "That is not my problem. Should we make a statement? The press is going to be all over this." Denzel stopped walking. He turned to face his assistant with a look that was both serious and kind. "Listen to me. I have been in this business for 40 years. I have seen trends come and go. I have seen people rise and fall. And the one thing I have learned is that you can never let anyone make you feel small. Not for ratings, not for clicks, not for anything." His assistant nodded, taking in every word. What happened in there was not about me versus her. It was about standing up for what is right. It was about refusing to be complicit in my own degradation. And if that cost me opportunities, so be it. My integrity is not for sale. He started walking again. "Now let us get out of here. I have better things to do with my day." They reached the exit and stepped outside into the cool morning air. The sun was just starting to rise higher in the sky, casting long shadows across the street. A few photographers had already gathered. Word travels fast in this business. They started snapping pictures and shouting questions. "Denzel, what happened in there? Denzel, are you going to sue the show? Denzel, how do you feel right now?" He did not answer any of them. He simply walked to the waiting car, opened the door, and got inside. As the car pulled away from the curb, Denzel looked out the window at the Today Show studio getting smaller in the distance. He had spent 40 years building something, a career, a legacy, a body of work that spoke for itself. And he was not about to let anyone tear that down in 15 minutes. Back in the studio, the commercial break was ending. The producers had made a decision. They were going to address what happened. They had to. There was no way to pretend it did not happen. Savannah took her seat again. The makeup artist had rushed over to touch up her face. She had been crying, or close to it. You could see the emotion in her eyes, even through the layers of foundation and powder. The floor manager gave the countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. "Welcome back. We experienced some technical difficulties during that last segment. We apologize for any confusion." Technical difficulties. That was the official story they were going with. It was almost laughable. But Savannah soldiered on. She introduced the next segment, something about a new cooking trend or a celebrity chef. It did not matter. No one was paying attention. Everyone was still thinking about Denzel. Everyone was still thinking about those 34 seconds of silence. Everyone was still thinking about what it meant when someone with nothing to prove stood up to someone with everything to lose. The rest of the show went on as scheduled. More segments, more interviews, more smiles and laughter and carefully scripted banter. But there was something different now. Something had shifted in the energy of the studio, in the energy of everyone involved, because they had all witnessed something rare, something real, something that broke through the artificial veneer of morning television and reminded everyone that underneath all the lights and cameras and makeup, there were actual human beings, with actual feelings, with actual limits. And Denzel Washington had reached his limit. He had reached it, and he had handled it with grace.